Hey everyone, Santa here, and welcome back to an episode of VGVG.
Episode 5.
Episode 5, or 4, I don't know, in which we talk about Rune Factory 5, not 4. And in this episode, we're here in person, because I'm at home.
Right. Ralph is visiting us in Australia.
Yeah, and here we have with me Kieran, who's
Hello.
been a bunch of videos.
How are you finding Australia compared
Really,
to
really
Europe?
good. I have a flood of good experiences.
That's good to hear. So, on to Rune Factory 5.
Rune Factory 5.
Yeah, I haven't played it. You just dragged me here to
Yes.
sit here.
Dragged him early to my place before like a board game session just to record this video. We have like half an hour, so we better get straight to it. So, Rune Factory 5. Good game. Good game. Good game. You would have no clue because you haven't
I have
played.
absolutely no idea.
So is it just going to be me
So
talking
tell
about
me a bit about it. Is it just more of the same compared to 4?
Rune Factory 5. It's a Rune Factory game. And it's the 5th.
Is that it?
Basic. Well, okay. So, as known, the sort of big transition, the sort of big thing about Rune Factory 5 is that transition to 3D, which makes a lot of things really good and a lot of things less good, which I guess what a lot of the discourse about the game is about. Like even before the game started, I think what a lot of people were saying is that it's basically the same. It's in 3D, but because of that, you have like weird frame rate and loading issues.
Right. That is something I saw when you showed me the game a few days ago.
Yeah, so I briefly showed Kieran and a bunch of people the game at one point. And yeah, that ended up being like the gut response with a bunch of people there.
Yeah,
Well-
it did not look good. There were a few colored squares falling from the sky, and the frame rate was around 10.
Yeah, so by sheer coincidence, I opened the game on like a festival day. No, that's where I was at the game. And falling squares apparently caused a lot of strain on the game hardware. But to be fair, it was like that in the previous games as well.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
I think Rune Factory 4 less so, but Rune Factory 2, definitely. Well, Rune Factory 2 always had like frame rate issues when there were a bunch of characters on the screen.
Right, because of the hardware.
Yeah.
But that's less of an issue now on the Switch.
Yes and no, because Rune Factory 4 is now, again, 3D. And I think they changed up the engine a bit as well, which makes it, I guess it is higher quality hardware, but also higher difficulty stuff. There's a lot more effort because we're no longer like on top down. We have like full freedom. We have a larger environment to play around in.
Okay.
Like I think in the previous games, the backgrounds must have been mostly 2D.
Hand-drawn or something like that.
Yeah, but now we actually have a full 3D environment to play in, which is really, really good and really, really bad. But yeah, well, let's first talk about the good things. I have like a list of notes of good things about the game.
The 4 good things, what are your overall impressions? Give me like an overall.
It's a good game.
That's
Good
it?
game. Yeah, it's a good game.
Is it a standout game of the year type of deal, or just...
Not quite. Haven't played many good games this year. Look, this is a very competitive year because Xenoblade's coming out in like 3 months. And I think that's like the game. Like that and Rune Factory.
Okay, not game of the year. Let's get rid of the year. Is it just
Okay.
game of? Is it as good as 4?
It's, in my opinion,
as much of a standout game as Rune Factory 4 was to you.
in my opinion, it was not nearly as good as Rune Factory 4. But I think that, before like I even got the game in my hands, I was like, this game, it's unreasonable to expect this game to be as good as Rune Factory 4.
Okay, I remember you saying that.
Yeah, just because, Rune Factory 4 was, in my opinion, a standout game, like one of the best games you've ever played. And it's hard, you can't really expect them to just keep hitting that like best game ever mark. And beyond that, it's been a while as a new team. Different people are trying to get used to how the game's supposed to work. New hardware, and again, that transition to 3D. So there's a lot of interesting things, and it's hard to. If it's any indication of how the teams handled things in the past, Rune Factory 3, which is 10 times better than Rune Factory 2, and Rune Factory 4 is 10 times better than Rune Factory 3. So when I came to this game, I'm expecting it to be a sort of like prototype of the future of Rune Factory.
Okay.
And from that perspective, I am very, very pleased.
Right.
And as a game, I enjoyed my time.
Is this overall, or is it purely technical? Like, are the story, characters, things like that?
Yeah.
Is that something that also fits in the could be better? It's a prototype. type of-
Yeah, for the most part, yes. But
Okay.
Well, in my opinion, Rune Factory 4 is probably the only Rune Factory game that I think had a story that I found actually compelling.
Right.
Rune Factory 2 and Rune Factory 3 were relatively less so, but Rune Factory 2 especially had a very mediocre story, and it had a good environment. It had good had good atmosphere is what I want to say. Rune Factory 5 has that as well, even if it lacks like an explicit storyline. But so in that regards, again, I'd be lying if I said I didn't expect anything, solely because Rune Factory 4 did have a good story, and it was the previous game, and I feel like those things shouldn't be as limited by experience with hardware. But Rune Factory 5 definitely had good elements in story, has good elements in characters. I have issues with like the way some characters are written, but I think I have always had those issues.
Alright.
So, yeah. Overall impressions, like, solid, like, B-tier game. Solid, like, I don't know, 8 out of 10 on my relatively strict...
Extremely high.
Well, I don't want to explain my weird rating system.
No, but 8 is still extremely high by any rating system.
Look, I finished the game on my Pokemon Legends Arceus, so...
That's good.
Yeah, and I'm still continuing through the game.
Okay, so you said you had a list of things that you liked about it.
Yes, well, the list of things I like is, okay, it's hard to talk about things you like because I can't just say, oh, this game was good. So I'm like very...
No, you can spoil me, it'll be a while before I get to
I don't think there's many things to spoil though. Point 1, lots of really fun systems. In other words, it's just like Rune Factory 4 in a lot of good ways.
Any major improvements to the systems?
There are major changes. So where I'm at right now, I haven't like gone fully in depth in how the game like into a lot of those.
Okay.
But it is good. It's good. I can't say it's better. I can't say it's worse. It's changed. My gut's feeling that a lot of it is indeed improved.
Right. Is it as complex, or have they kind of streamlined things a bit?
They've made changes, but I feel like unless you've gone super in depth, you won't notice those changes. I don't think it's streamlined. In my case, the only thing I've really looked into a bit are some of the crafting mechanics.
Right.
I haven't looked into cooking. I haven't looked into farms. But I think the farm, like the sort of soil mechanics, are basically the same way.
Okay.
The crafting mechanics have subtle changes, which end up adding more complexity. But the complexity you wouldn't notice unless you like really go into it.
Okay.
Bottom line though, because a lot of those are copy pasted at the end from Rune Factory 4, where they've had years and years of iterations, they are good. They were expected to be good, but they completed as expected a really, really good job. So yeah.
I see.
Good point number 2. Good designs.
Oh, what? The characters?
Everything. Well, many of the characters. All the characters. Many of the characters. All the characters have really good character designs. Like just the general art of the game and the art design is, I think, really, really good.
I feel like some of the design was a bit weaker than I expected. Because I've seen the portrait art, the character art of the main characters, and
Really? Okay.
I wasn't really sold.
Because in my mind, I think they're a lot better. I feel like the artists have definitely improved.
Yeah, the art itself is good from like a technical standpoint, but I feel like the designs are a bit too generic.
Okay.
I don't know if that's just me. Like the main characters, for instance.
I feel like that's a thing that might be a bit more exposure based. Like I feel like if you're more familiar with Rune Factory 4 characters, you might feel more attached to them. Whereas when you're playing the Rune Factory 5 and they are completely new to you.
No, just looking at the designs by themselves, the previous main characters they were generic in the way that they can be you, they are a main character, but they also had some features that are a bit more unique.
Sorry, specifically talking about the protagonist.
Just the protagonist, yeah.
Okay.
Whereas the main male character just looks like Hitler Youth. I shouldn't have said that.
It's fine. I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah,
but okay, I guess
just purely even the clothing, the silhouette and stuff like that is not suitably unique, but it's still very good. I like it from a technical standpoint.
Yeah. Well, good sub point number, whatever. You have a lot more costume customization.
Okay, and do they show up on your...
They don't show up on your character sprite, but they show up on your character, like, 3D model.
Okay.
So you know how in Rune Factory 4 you had, like, you could change your color and maybe put on a suit of armor, or put on a giant woolly onesie. In Rune Factory 5 you have, like, actually quite a few different unique costume designs.
Okay.
So yeah, even if so, I changed that pretty quickly. But yeah, so I guess that's something that works with 3D model. In terms of the 2D art, I think the 2D art is definitely technically better than in Factory 4,
Right.
which works out well for it. I can't really comment on how generic looking the characters are. I guess when you play the game, like it's you.
Yeah, it's not an issue. I saw the other characters, just the protagonists.
Sure. But yeah, I guess in any case, like overall, I do like the art direction of the characters,
Okay.
and also the art direction of the worlds. The world design in general looks really, really good. In my opinion, I feel like I might have controversial opinions on this because, for example, I had generally positive opinions of the Switch Pokemon games' graphics,
Okay.
which the internet seems to hate. But yeah, in this case, I feel like all the 3D designs, like, it's nice, it's happy, it's like bright colored.
Yeah, that's all you can expect.
Yeah, I feel like they probably aren't like as detailed backgrounds as we got in, the hand drawn Rune Factory 4, but they're good. I like it. And the last good thing that Rune Factory
Last good thing.
last good thing I wanted to emphasize, again, other than the general perspective of everything is pretty good, is that you have a lot of freedom early on in like where you go in the world.
Okay.
It's pretty interesting because like a week before the game released, I saw like a comment on Reddit being all like a post on Reddit being like, "Oh, I wish Rune Factory was like open world or something," and I'm like, Rune Factory 4 was vaguely open world, but then I got this game and I'm like, this game is like actually in some sense open world because you have so much freedom in where you want to go.
Okay.
Early in the game, like
There's no set path or anything? Or
no, like you can see the entire overworld like instantly.
interesting.
You unlock new dungeons as the game progresses and as the storyline demands. But the actual overworld, you can access like wholly as you want. The game has some interesting mechanics actually, where you basically do you basically get hunts for monsters.
Right.
You basically leave, they send you like on a mission to like hunt the monster, and because of the open world design, you can do that entire thing like as you start the game.
Interesting.
So you just
So there's the only thing that blocks you off from specific areas is difficulty.
yeah, basically yeah.
There aren't any artificial walls or anything like that.
On the overworld,
Okay.
the dungeons are hard blocked, but the overworld, yeah, you have full access to, which works out really, really well, really interestingly. Because Rune Factory's the way Rune Factory's mechanics work in regards to like numbers show that you're going to like do 0 damage to some monsters, so you need to find some way around that. And of course, there are many ways around that in Rune Factory. But yeah, it makes for an interesting like challenge if you want to go that route.
Okay.
Which I definitely had fun with early on. So yeah, lots of really cool good things that Rune Factory 5 did. But yeah, so those are the good things. Now, the bad things.
Is this a much longer list?
Well, it's a much longer list because it's easier to complain than it is to like to say good things about.
All right.
It's easy to see where things are going wrong than just say everything is really, really right. But yeah, it's a longer list. But there things that'll probably go a bit faster. Annoying thing number 1, loading screens. I don't have a problem with the frame rate. I have huge problems with loading screens though, which is like it's really interesting because it's hard to describe like how much it inhibits the game, because it does actually inhibit your enjoyment of the game to some extent.
Okay. Explain loading screens to me. Are they long or are they just many of them?
They're long.
They're long, but there aren't just so many of them that you can't travel without hitting one every few seconds.
Yes and no. So the world, so the actual town itself is much larger. The town itself is much larger than Rune Factory 4, so it does take you longer to get from like one side of the town to the other.
Okay.
There are some like fast travel points from like one side of the town to the other, and if you use them, you need to go through a loading screen.
Right. Is it faster just to walk?
Sometimes not.
All right.
They're like, and as well, maybe someone's like on the second floor building, so you need to climb like all the way up the giant building to talk to someone, and then you want to go all the way down. And of course, again, if you go inside buildings, you need to go through a loading screen. Walk outside, there's a loading screen. Like the entire town is at least one zone, unlike in Factory 4 where there are multiple zones. But yeah, it takes quite a while to go from screen to screen.
Right, so every time you leave the building, you need to load the entire town.
Yes.
Is what you're saying?
Yeah. which is very, very slow. In the sense that, like, how to put it? At least when I was experiencing the game, I found myself like actively trying to avoid loading the town if I could.
Okay. It was that much of an issue to you?
Yeah, because it takes easily probably like 5-10 seconds every time you load. Again, compared to especially Refractory 4 Special, where you go incredibly quickly from place to place. This does not have that. So I feel like the lack of loading in Refractory 4 worked really well to add to your ability, like your feeling of freedom. Like you could go everywhere and do anything. Like you had full freedom in what you want to do. And in Refractory 5, even though, as said, you actually do have freedom, the fact that you need to wait like 5 or 10 seconds just to go home, instead of just like mashing the escape button.
Right.
It feels more closed off. When you go into a house, rather than you just instantly walk into the house, as you did in Refractory 4, you wait 5 seconds to load in, and you wait 5 seconds to load out, which adds that sort of like barrier to. It feels less connected, even though it is indeed more connected.
Okay, but this would be less of a problem if it was ported to another system.
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking of. So I feel like in some way a port to like a PC, for example, where you have stronger hardware than you might have with a Switch, could actually help in this regard, same with the frame rate. Because when you're actually playing the game, you don't really notice the frame rate issues at all. I guess if you're like not used to it and coming in, you might see some issues. But when you're actually playing it, it's fine. It's the loading screens that really do inhibit. It's particularly annoying because in some of the story scenes, they, for example, load scenes in the town while you're they transition from like where your character is to like the town, for example. There's one particular scene which I'm not going to say what happened in the scene, but like you're talking to your character's talking. They load to the town for like a 10-second loading screen. They say like 3 lines. They have a 10-second loading screen back to you. Say like 3 lines with a 10-second loading screen back to the town.
That is unfortunate.
And yeah, it definitely takes you out of the experience in a way that is somewhat inhibiting.
Okay.
It's not like, oh, I hate this game, but it is. Yes, it's something that you wish could be better.
All right.
Yeah, and I think, in my opinion, that's probably the biggest issue. Well, my biggest issue is I think the game feels a bit slow, and that is one of those things.
Right. So your major issue is a technical one.
Yes.
That's what you're saying.
Yes.
I mean, that's a good start, I guess.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it just means you have to stuff it, like, because Rune Factory in general, you do stuff like every day, and then you do stuff that are unique to what you want to do in the day, if that makes sense. Like every day you're going to water your crops, every day you're going to talk to everyone in town, every day you're going to feed your animals. And it just means that those everyday things that add to the experience in general are inhibited a lot by those really slow loading screens where you aren't doing anything.
I see.
So yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense, I think.
Yes. Point 2, the game's slower in general. Like those repetitive things do take a lot longer. A, because the town is so much larger, so it takes longer to like walk from place to place and talk to everyone in the village. And B, this is just a weird decision, I'm not sure why. You know how in Rune Factory 4, when you charged up your like axe, for example, you could mash it like 3 times and do like 3 full charged axe strikes.
Okay, yes.
Can't do that here. 1 charged axe strike for like charge.
And then you need to charge again.
Yeah, which means like even just like clearing your farm is like clearing your farm for like sticks takes a really long time. I guess you can use like your animals. I guess it could be one way of suddenly asking the player to use animals to clear it for you. But yeah, it's definitely a game change that, in my opinion, like just makes the game feel slower in general. So yeah, the game is slow in those regards, but it's fine.
What about the story pacing and the
Story
plot
pacing.
points? Is that any slower?
The story is
I think it's
less.
around the same.
The story is less good.
The story's less good. But is it slower? Does that tie in with what you said before?
I guess so. Well, okay, how to put it? I had little attachment to the story itself. I had attachment to the story atmosphere, and you don't care about pacing for like atmosphere, if that makes sense.
Right.
Like I don't care how fast the story is if I enjoy the town design, or how the town feels. Because I didn't care about the story, I didn't really care about the story's pacing.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So I can't really comment on that. What I can comment, I guess, is on the gameplay pacing, which is better than Rune Factory 2.
But that's not a very high bar.
No. I think the big issue that I've spoken about with like friends online is that Rune Factory 4 is Rune Factory 5 is like sort of big gameplay pacing issue is that it takes you a long time to get your the flower shop, which is very specific. But like, yeah, it's weird because without flowers you can't like do chemistry, and without chemistry you can't like cover your farm in like fertilizer.
Right.
And the fertilizer, your overall farm progression is much slower. I guess it's a good argument for like how good like the system is to intertwine, where like if you just chop off like one leg which is access to the flower, it just ricochets over the entire system. But yeah, it's weird. It's a weird decision. I guess I can sort of see it because maybe they want you to slow down your farm progression. Maybe they thought it was too fast. But yeah, it's a weird design choice. Actually, related to that is the fact that seasonal farms are now gone in this game.
Okay. Did you use those?
In Rune Factory 4?
You're talking about the ones in the middle of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
it's just always winter or something.
Yeah, exactly. So in this game, whatever season it is whatever season it is in all of the farm plots in the world.
Okay.
Which further serves to slow down like crop progression. Like in my game, for example, I got to I unlocked like the 4-leaf clovers in summer, and 4-leaf clovers grow very poorly in summer, but you need 4-leaf clovers for like a lot of random things.
Right.
Oh yeah, and that's like another annoying point because you need 4-leaf clovers to make happy rings, and happy rings are needed for better like item drops, but you can't get 4-leaf clovers because you don't have the flower shop, and why won't that witch lady come to your village sooner? Anyway, yeah, that's
I see.
it's really strange.
I think I understand that point.
What?
I understand what you were getting at with that
The
point.
witch lady?
No, not the witch lady, the systems.
Okay, yeah, exactly.
And the slowness of gameplay in general.
Yeah, again, it's not debilitating, but it's a weird choice to say. Yeah, I think I've gone through most of this actually. I have like two more biggish points. One's about the combat, but before I get to the combat, it is the
characters.
Yeah, some characters are very odd to me, more so than they are in like Rune Factory 4.
What do you mean? As in they're just
unusual.
They're just not individuals. They're just
yes, they're much more caricatures.
Yeah, that's good.
Which again, compared to like Rune Factory 2 and 3, where they probably were more caricatures, it's probably fair. But Rune Factory 4 was, I think, really good with having characters that have more depth. In Rune Factory 5, we don't quite. Well, we have that for some characters, but others are really annoying.
How much of the story arcs have you gone through? You finished the game. Have you? Are there individual quest lines for each of them or anything like that?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Actually, yeah. This is a good and bad point about 5. The town event system in Rune Factory 4 has been revamped to some extent. So in Rune Factory 4, if you recall, town events were wholly random. The game just decides where you want to go, what town event is going on, and like the whole town, your characters go to position, you go to the place, and some event, some like scene will happen. Rune Factory 5 is not like that. You get like markers on the map telling you where to go. In some sense, that means you have some freedom because if you see you'll see like multiple characters' faces on the map, and you'll go to that location to trigger the town event. After that, all the town events are closed off until you finish the current town event. So I like how you have that freedom. What I dislike is that it feels less. It's okay. So in Rune Factory 4, the characters actually go to where they're supposed to be. In Rune Factory 5, that doesn't happen.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're going on with their actual things, what their actual daily routines. You go to the location, and somehow everyone is there doing the scene.
Right.
And then after the scene ends, they're instantly back to wherever they actually were on the map. So it feels less real, it feels more fake. And because they only exist for that scene, the characters don't comment on the events, which is really, really, yeah. I liked how in Factory 4 you would have like the compulsory town event scenes, and then you could bother Chlorica for her opinion on this scene after. In Factory 5 you don't do that. The scene ends, and then that's
like it never happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Which is pretty disappointing. But again, you do have some freedom in how you do it. I feel like, that's... I guess this might be a recurring trend where I feel like the game is probably not as finished as it could be. And I feel like this is one of those things where I feel like maybe they didn't have... I feel like there's no reason why they wouldn't have done it if they had more time. So I feel like this is something they could and will fix in a future game.
Right.
But yeah, it adds to it.
Was that your entire problem with the characters, or
No.
did you dislike them on a more individual basis?
Yeah, well, okay, it's weird because the two characters I dislike the most are also happen to be two characters that the subreddit and I think the Discord has a bad discussion about as love interests.
Interesting.
So am I going to get banned from the subreddit if I talk about this? Maybe not.
What are your issues about these characters?
So one of them talks in animal speech the entire time, which is disappointing because I love the voice actor. The voice actor is Christina V.
What do you mean animal speech?
You mean like Banjo-Kazooie? Like that.
Sorry, say that again.
No, I'm not going to do the animal speech.
Okay.
What we will do is we cut. I'll make you like the Christina V like Sprigatito. Have I ever showed you that? Yes, we're gonna do 1 second of that clip.
Okay.
Because I love Christina V. She's amazing. She has like a cool YouTube channel. She was like Zero in like Louise in Zero no Tsukaima, and like the Robin in Ruby. And she was gonna be Edelgard in Fire Emblem, but yeah, now she's an animal character who does animal speech.
Interesting. I thought you were into that type of thing.
No.
You told me you dressed up as an animal for some event, right?
Completely out of context.
Okay.
How do I recover from this?
What other character did you dislike?
It's not just the animal speech. It's the fact that they also just act like an animal. So like like half her like speech bubbles are about how much she like chases Sparkly. Like she actually just calls them Sparklies. What's a Sparkly? I don't know, but she chases them. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So caveat. I've seen some discussion on the internet about this before the ban, where people are like, before it was banned from discussion.
Was it really that bad?
Well, yeah. Okay, because again, they had similar things with Amber in Factory 4.
Oh, because they were
it's
literally a child.
Yeah, the character looks like quite childish. And the other one I heard is that not everyone self-inserts as the characters. Which
Which makes sense.
Yes, exactly. Which I think is a very valid argument. Like again, if I were like an 80-year-old New Zealand lady, there's a really good YouTuber who's an 80-year-old New Zealand lady. I'm gonna follow up on this.
Oh, yeah, good.
Okay. So if you're like an 80-year-old New Zealand lady, you aren't going to date a character because you like them. You are separate from the character you're playing.
Right. I think that's how I played for. I didn't see myself in the shoes of a strange green-haired man.
Exactly.
It was entirely separate from me.
And yeah, so when you do that, I feel like pairing like your character's personality with the personality of a literal child is less weird.
No, it's all right. Fine.
It's less weird than I think actually thinking that actually liking that character on its face value.
Okay, and you're saying that instead of being a child, it is an animal in this case.
Yeah, but she also looks like a child.
Oh,
like a child animal. I also just like Cecil. He's a detective. He tries to be a detective. He's just very bad at his job. Well, I think I think he's basically this game's attempt to replicate Keel, who I think some people have issues with from Factory 4, but I've always thought was really, really cool. Because
why so? I don't think I've seen
why people liked him or hated him.
Hated him.
Oh, he looked very young. He looked very young. And I think that was the limits of why they dislike him.
Right.
I think it was just.
I don't think I noticed that.
Okay. Yeah, I think it was just follow on from Amber discourse, where people didn't really, where people like, yeah, and he was childish, arguably, but when I interpreted him, I found him as like innocent-ish. Like he makes comments where he just is doesn't understand things or just always playing around, which to me reads as innocent. Cecil comes off as childish. Like everyone else needs to like, in the sense that he's a child, everyone else needs to like play around him. Like his first town event is terrible. He wants a job to do, so he goes to your boss, asks for something to do, and so your boss gets you to go around the entire village, getting everyone to sign a note, like a fake note. So this
just to play into his fantasies.
Yeah, and the town event is you going around through like 10 billion loading screens, being like, "Can you sign this thing?" And the conversation, the dialogue isn't interesting. The dialogue is literally, this is for this thing, and they sign the thing, and then the loading screen ends, and you go back, go through the entire town. And it's really, really slow. And the end of the entire town event, he didn't even do his job. Like he didn't even get the thing signed. So you, like, yeah. And it's not. I can see why maybe some people might find it endearing. To me, it's just like annoying.
Yeah, you're past that point in your life.
Yes. Yeah. So Cecil, he's a childish character, and it, I think, reflects poorly on some of the systems, because it does aggravate the systems and making them noticeably worse. Yeah. So that's the Cecil discourse, the character discourse. Some are pretty made over. The last thing is the combat thing. The last one I wanted to say was the combat thing, which is, I just want to say, unfinished. Well, okay, there are good things about the combat and there are bad things about the combat. The good thing that I like is that the combat is less rune ability focused. Rune abilities in general, I think, got a relative nerf compared to like actual.
But they were incredibly strong in the previous iteration.
Yes, in the previous iterations, they were all you did.
Before we go more into combat, actually, about the characters, how do you feel about the fact that you can now date anyone?
You can't date anyone.
Really? No, like...
Okay, take people to, like, festivals.
No, like bachelors and bachelorettes.
Sorry, that's what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I got that point across very well. Yeah. If you're playing a male character, you can now date.
Yeah.
You can now date men.
It's good.
Does it?
Actually,
I think that was interesting that you couldn't in 4 because both sides weren't analogues of each other. They had pretty much the bachelors and bachelorettes were distinct. That you wouldn't get the same experience.
Actually, yes, it was a different time back then, so I sort of understand why they might have been more hesitant in the past. Here it works out well. I guess this could reflect some of the earlier issues, because when it's time to select the next town event and just have like everyone's faces pop up, I feel like we would have had less. I feel like you might have had fewer choices without the same-sex marriage edition. But overall, I'm all for it. Like, it's very, very good.
Yeah. Are they both suitably unique? Like, in 4? So they are just mirror copies of each other. You don't have one that corresponds to another. Oh,
so I'm not gone to the point where I could actually date any of the candidates yet. I've just seen the town events.
Right.
But yeah, so I can't really comment at this stage. But thus far, they do seem relatively unique. So I'm all for it. Combat is good.
And you were talking about rune abilities being...
Yes. Yeah, rune abilities are general nerfed. So that means that your decision point about what weapon you use is actually a bit more important. Because now you're actually using your longsword as a longsword instead of like a punching stick.
Right.
Which is really, really good. The flip side is that I feel like a lot of the boss designs are a bit worse. So there's... Rune abilities were interesting. Straight punch was a really cool skill where you did have to time like what you were doing really, really well. You have fewer options in this regard, so it's a bit more difficult to do. But I think the big thing is that the combat in regards to the monsters are incredibly unbalanced in this game. There are, how to put it, there are monsters halfway through the final dungeon, a quarter way through the final dungeon, that are strong, or the post-game dungeon, that have more stats than the final boss. Like the final boss of the dungeon.
Interesting.
I think they just forgot to rebalance it. Like, you fight these you fight these just yellow dragons, which you're going to do 0 damage to. And you need to find a way to work around the 0 damage. I would say that there could be an interesting decision in forcing the player to decide, how to use status, how to use failed dishes, how to use straight punch. But I feel like I'm not sure if that was intentional or not, because it's like a quarter way through the final dungeon. You need to find some way around them.
Are you completely obliged to fight them? There's no way.
Yeah, you have to evade them some way. I think you can also use a rosary.
Okay.
So there's an argument, maybe you were supposed to use a rosary to get through them. But for the most part, there are these invisible walls. There are these wall monsters. You need to find some way to beat them. And if you beat them via stat balling, the boss is going to do 0 damage to you. Which, like in my case, that's more or less what happened. Like where I'm at right now in the game, I was getting 3 or 4 hit by those yellow dragons after so when I first fought them, I was getting 2 shot by them. Then I was getting 3 or 4 shot by them, and when my defense was high enough to get 3 or 4 shot by those guys, I was face attacking the final boss. The final boss just couldn't hurt me. Which I think is an oversight by game balance issues,
right?
Because this is an post-game dungeon.
Do you think the system translated well to 3D? Are the hitboxes solid and all that?
Yeah. I would say in general it is. There are some issues with regards to ranges and stuff. Well, actually, so this is hitbox issues. In the sense that you do need to try a lot harder to, aim and do things.
Okay.
How do I put it? When you put it in 3D, you're making more of a comparison to Monster Hunter. You're making for more comparison to Monster Hunter, and the combat reflects more poorly to Monster Hunter once you are forced to make that comparison, is what I want to say.
Alright.
Anyway, I think it is time to start closing off this discussion, also because someone is almost here. So,
do you want to cover anything else?
I think I'm mostly good.
You and your crafting, what are you going to do?
First up, comparisons between 4 and 5.
What have you found? Anything major?
I found anything about accessories, and I uploaded a video yesterday, which I might have taken down right now because I might have found some issues with it.
What?
But I'll get to it.
Okay, so you're just going to... Do you think there'll be an entire series, or can you just go over what's in 4?
We'll see. We'll see how I feel. It's hard to plan my schedule very much. I've got busy work times coming up, but I'll try and see what we can do. I'll make as many videos as I can, and as high as quality as I can, and make sure they're all accurate and useful for all the viewers.
Alright, so overall, thoughts on the game? You said 8 out of 10?
8 out of 10.
Very solid.
B+.
Okay.
It's just B+. 8 out of 10 is B+, right?
Uh,
Whatever. I approve. Play Rune Factory 5. And Rune Factory 6 when it comes out will probably be better. Yeah. Maybe it'll come out a bit better in port. Is that all? It's gratis. Yeah.